All right, we got the Epstein Files Iceberg Part 2. Let's go. This is going to be my longest iceberg to date. So if you want to see the full video, it's on my YouTube, link in the bio. If not, then enjoy some of the clips I post on here. Upon posting my previous iceberg on this topic, I was met with a lot of questions. But the one I was asked the most was, well, who is this guy? Who is Jeffrey Epstein? And why is the internet going crazy about him? Why should I care? And before I dive into the full iceberg, I want to answer this question because it's very important to understand the full story behind this guy to understand why these files are so important. Epstein was a financier who managed billions of dollars for very powerful people. We don't know the exact client list that Epstein had, but I think it's safe to assume that most of the names that we can find in the Epstein files were most likely at least some of his clients. People like Les Wexner, the owner of Victoria's Secret, which is an entire rabbit hole in itself, and other powerful people like Bill Clinton. The idea is that Epstein took some of this money these powerful people were giving him and built a global human trafficking infrastructure. This guy had multiple locations across the United States in which this trafficking took place, an entire private transportation network, and a recruitment pipeline actively recruiting young girls are just some of the things this guy used the money for. In 2005, he was arrested in Florida after parents of a 14-year-old girl reported him for paying their daughter to give him a massage, which we know now those massages weren't just massages. Their daughter said she was recruited by another teen to go to Epstein's house, and after being sexually abused during the massage, she was paid $300 and told she could earn more money by bringing other girls. This report triggered an investigation to which police later identified multiple underage girls with the same or similar stories involving payment for sexual activities. I say this all the time when talking about things like this. One or two of the same stories, not a good look. Multiple of the same stories from unrelated sources. Something is happening, something is going on, and we can't just look past it. And before any of this, the FBI had a 53-page, yes, 53-page federal indictment ready for sex trafficking that could have put him away for life. But instead, prosecutor Alexander Acosta gave him a sweetheart deal. Epstein pleaded guilty to one state charge, served 13 months in a private jail wing with a 12-hour daily work release. This guy spent most of his time in a comfortable office rather than behind bars for his crimes. And this deal was kept secret from the victims. But in 2018, the Miami Herald exposed the corrupt deal and caused public outrage. And on July 6, 2019, Epstein was arrested again at Teterboro Airport and charged with federal sex trafficking of minors. And upon FBI agents raiding his Manhattan townhouse, found thousands of photos of young girls, a fake passport, and stacks of cash in a locked safe, enough to put just about anyone in jail. And this time, there would be no deal, and Epstein was denied bail. Then on August 10th, 2019, he was found dead in his cell. The official cause was suicide by hanging, but we don't believe that at all. The chain of failures that occurred that night that Epstein killed himself are insane. Epstein had been placed on suicide watch after an earlier incident where he was found with marks on his neck, but was removed from suicide watch about 6 days later, which isn't too out of the ordinary. However, what is weird is his cellmate was transferred out the night before he died, leaving him alone in a cell that was supposed to have 2 people in it at all times. The 2 guards assigned to check on him every 30 minutes both fell asleep, which doesn't usually happen, especially because they probably take naps and shifts, so that's crazy. And then later, pencil whipped their logs to cover it up. And then, very conveniently, the 2 cameras pointing towards his cell malfunctioned around the same exact time. And to top it all off, when the autopsy was performed, the medical examiner found Epstein had multiple broken bones in his neck, including the hyoid bone, which is more commonly associated with strangulation than hanging. Though this can occur in hanging sometimes, but paired with everything else, it didn't exactly calm anyone down. So just to recap, the cameras malfunctioned, the guards fell asleep, his cellmate was moved literally the night before he killed himself, he was taken off suicide watch days before, and his injuries raised questions about whether it was really suicide. Nothing says suicide by soft fabric quite like a perfect storm of failures and injuries more commonly seen in strangulation cases than hanging cases. Epstein's death meant he would never stand trial, and everyone in his network and client list would remain protected. Nothing would get out. And that brings us here, present day. We have had 3.5 million pages of documents clearly showing guilt, but the DOJ has publicly stated new charges are unlikely due to the lack of corroborated evidence, which I can kind of see, but I don't know. I think we got some rock solid evidence in these files showing powerful people partaking in, or at least being okay with, human trafficking.
I think it's really time for the country to get onto something else, really. Now that nothing came out about me, other than it was a conspiracy against me, literally, by Epstein and other people. But I think it's time now for the country to maybe get onto something else.
What would you say to people
like
who feel like they haven't gotten
healthcare,
justice, Mr. President?
something that people care about?
People in power want this case buried, forgotten, and for good reason, because once you start looking into it some more and start connecting some dots, the implications are brutal and it's very scary. Proceed with caution whenever you start looking into some of this stuff. Moving on, we have the Pizzagate conspiracy. In 2016, WikiLeaks released thousands of emails from John Podesta's account. This is the same guy who people are claiming is the voice in that one video where it sounds like he's literally torturing a child.
What's my name? What's my name? My other name, what do you call me? I am your father. From now on, you will call me your father. You will call me your father. What is my name, huh?
I'm just a kid who's 4. Each day I grow some more.
I don't think it's really him. It definitely could be him. It does sound like him, but who really knows at this point? There's so much stuff floating around online. John Podesta is one of the most powerful and connected men in Washington, Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman and former White House chief of staff. The emails were full of politically concerning stuff, geopolitically concerning stuff, but the internet began to notice something very weird. There were incredibly strange references to food that just didn't make sense at all. There was an email discussing flying in $65,000 worth of hot dogs and pizza for a private event. Do you know how many dogs that is? And why would you spend $65,000 flying in hot dogs? I think spending that much money doing something like that should be a crime in and of itself. And then there's the email from Tamir Lozado to John Podesta about a pool party at a farm in Lovettsville. The email says, "We plan to heat the pool, so a swim is a possibility. Bonnie will be Uber service to transport Ruby, Emerson, and Maeve Lozado, 11, 9, and almost 7. So you'll have some further entertainment, and they will be in that pool for sure." Now, people have debated what this means. Some say it's just a family gathering and those are her grandkids, but the phrasing further entertainment and specifying the exact ages of the children struck a lot of people, including myself, as deeply strange and disturbing. And then there are multiple very weird conversations about pizza, like the infamous handkerchief email where someone asks if Podesta left a handkerchief at someone's house and it's described as having a map that seems pizza related. People began associating the term cheese pizza with the abbreviation CP, which you can do the math, I'm not saying it. So people began to dig deeper and they noticed that certain pizza places kept being referenced in these emails, places where these powerful people were hosting parties, pizza parties. One place in particular kept coming up, Comet Ping Pong, a pizza restaurant in the heart of DC run by a very politically connected insider named James Alefantis. In 2012, Alefantis was listed by GQ magazine as one of the 50 most powerful people in Washington, DC, which is a very strange distinction for a pizza shop owner, I may add. People began digging into the Instagram account for Comet Ping Pong, and they found some pretty disturbing things on this Instagram page, including that one picture that everyone is claiming comes out of the Epstein files. Yeah, it doesn't. It comes from this really weird Instagram page that has kind of been scrubbed from the internet at this point. I mean, I haven't been able to find any of these posts myself because the account was made private after people started asking questions about it. But the consensus among people who archived the images and who actually saw the images is that there were photos of children taped to tables, which we have that, references to kill rooms, a photo of a walk-in freezer with the hashtag murder underneath it, and multiple photos of infants and toddlers with really strange and sexually suggestive comments from users. And in Podesta's emails, you can find high-level political figures discussing going to this exact restaurant for lunch. And from there, the theory began to spiral, and people began to believe that all the food found within Podesta's emails are code for something. And look, it is genuinely weird how much these people talk about food in these emails. You'll see an email discussing some insane geopolitical issue, and then the very next email is two grown men discussing last night's pizza party. There's also the connection to Marina Abramovic and Spirit Cooking. This is the same lady that's seen in that photo with Lady Gaga eating what looks to be a body, but it was just a performance art. It was meant to be provocative and creepy. It's not from the files, unlike what a lot of people are claiming. But basically, Tony Podesta, John Podesta's brother, was invited to a spirit cooking dinner, which many link this spirit cooking dinner with satanic rituals, especially due to the human heads on the table and the supposed ingredients used in the food. But I don't really think this has any truth to it. It definitely added fuel to the fire though. And when people started digging into Tony Podesta's art collection, they found he owned extremely disturbing paintings, including images of young girls in their underwear with their hands behind their backs and a painting of what appears to be a malnourished child tied up by their arm. But then the media responded, and they basically took all of these legitimate questions these people were asking and repackaged them as these crazy people on the internet think that Hillary Clinton is personally running a satanic pedophile cabal out of the basement of this random pizza place in DC, which nobody was claiming. They were just making connections and asking questions. And there's more to this story. I can go really deep with this. This is an Epstein iceberg, so eventually I need to talk about the file, so I'll get on with it. On December 4th, 2016, a man named Edgar Madison Welch walks into Comet Ping Pong with an AR-15. He claims he was there to self-investigate, which he kind of did by scaring everyone there, letting off a couple shots into a locked door, finding nothing, and then just leaving. Reports say he didn't hit anybody, nor did he cause an insane amount of damage. However, some people claim he shot a hard drive in the back room that had incriminating evidence on it, though this detail has never officially been confirmed. It's part of the conspiracy theory. He gets arrested very publicly, and he gives a couple of sound bites to the effect of, "I was so convinced it was all real and it was all here and it's just not." And from that moment on, the media labeled Pizzagate as a dangerous conspiracy theory that led to violence. Edgar Madison Welch, the shooter who walked into Comet Ping Pong that day and conveniently shot the hard drives, was shot by police during a traffic stop in North Carolina on January 4th, 2025, and died 2 days later. I don't think there was actually a hard drive he went in and shot. I think he was just a man who wanted answers and went about it the wrong way. But that was the end of Pizzagate, a wild conspiracy which in all honesty really had some very strong points to it, unlike a lot of the other conspiracy theories out there. But in the end, it led to violence, and the media censored just about anything or anybody that talked about it. However, with the most recent Epstein files that dropped earlier this year, this theory was revived because out of everything people were expecting to be in these files, countless references to pizza and other foods like jerky was not one of them. There are over 800 references to pizza in the Epstein emails, and these aren't normal references. There's an email exchange between Epstein and a doctor where they're discussing pizza and grape soda, two of the most unhealthy things you can consume, being discussed by health-obsessed billionaires who literally get blood transfusions to extend their lives. Then you've got butt cake sounds great, but I need a pizza. Appreciated the pizza today. Thank you for letting us do that. You mean radiating a soft glow with the look of bliss and excitement. Yeah. That's the pizza. Someone emailed Epstein asking if they could use the apartment for a bit or get pizza for 30 minutes. Grown men can be seen emailing Epstein, thanking him for the pizza party and asking him when the next pizza party is. I don't know if I just haven't lived my life properly, but I am a grown man and I haven't been to a pizza party in years. What are we really talking about here? What's going on? Why are these grown men talking about pizza parties? And so much more. The word pizza and other food items are used in the weirdest, oddest ways possible in these emails. You also have jerky mentioned in these files a lot. Jojo is here and will walk the jerky over to Jeffrey. There is one bag of beef jerky in the fridge. I suppose it needs to be in a cold insulated bag. J.E., Jeffrey Epstein, said he was going to be eating regular food again, so he might be eating less jerky. He said he has 6 bags of it in the downstairs freezer, and so much more. I honestly think jerky has more of a life likelihood to actually mean something rather than pizza. I think pizza is in the past, and I think jerky is the new code word. People are saying it's code for child meat, and I'll just let you sit with that for a little while. I don't really know where they're getting that information from, but that's what people are saying right now. Now, conspiracy theorists have created alleged code word lists that they believe were being used in these emails. I want to be clear, these are not proven, and these are speculative interpretations. And notice how jerky isn't on here. I think jerky is like the new kid on the block. This is the new code word, and they're getting pretty bold with it. Like, it doesn't really seem they're trying to hide the fact that jerky means something else other than just plain old beef jerky. And whether these interpretations are accurate or just people reading too much into weird rich people being weird, that's up for debate. But what's not up for debate is that the same patterns people noticed in Podesta's emails are showing up in Epstein's emails tenfold. And nobody in the media or the government has been asked to explain any of it. Pizzagate was dismissed, buried, and censored. The shooter is now dead, and Comet Ping Pong's Instagram is gone. But the questions still remain. And what the Epstein files showing hundreds of references to pizza used in these bizarre non-food contexts, the theory that something was being coded in those Podesta emails back in 2016 doesn't seem as crazy as it once did. I'm not gonna lie. Moving on, we have the modeling trap and Ghislaine Maxwell's entire operation. Before I jump into this, I first want to explain who Ghislaine Maxwell is, because if you've been watching stuff on Epstein, you've undoubtedly heard her name at least once. Ghislaine Maxwell was Jeffrey Epstein's longtime associate, girlfriend, and business partner. She came from British high society, and her father, Robert Maxwell, which is a whole nother rabbit hole, a wealthy media tycoon who died under mysterious circumstances in 1991 after falling off his yacht. After her father's death, Ghislaine moved to New York and became romantically involved with Epstein in the early 1990s. But even after their romantic relationship ended, she remained his closest confidant and, as we now know, his primary recruiter. In December 2021, Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted on 5 federal charges, including sex trafficking of minors, and she's currently serving a 20-year prison sentence. But her conviction only scratches the surface of what this lady actually did. Ghislaine didn't just find girls randomly. She ran a corporate-style recruitment operation that looked legitimate on the surface, which made it so effective and evil. According to victim testimony and documents from the 2026 files, Ghislaine would scout at specific locations, art camps, schools, shopping malls, beach clubs, and other places where young girls from middle-class or struggling families would be. She had a profile she was looking for. They had to be in a vulnerable situation, those who were in foster care or in a low-income family, someone she could easily manipulate. She would approach them, compliment them, and talk about their potential. It said she would say things like, "You have the perfect look for European modeling agencies," or "I know people who could help you get a scholarship," or "Have you ever thought about a career in fashion?" Just talking these young girls up. And then she'd offer them opportunities, modeling, contracts, mentorships, scholarships, connections to prestigious schools, anything to get these girls to say yes. Once the girls agreed to this, the modeling Ghislaine hired them for turned into massages, and the scholarships became a way to keep them financially dependent. Let me give you 2 examples of how this actually worked. The first victim, who testified at Maxwell's trial using only the name Jane, was recruited at Interlochen Arts Camp in Michigan when she was only 14 years old. Ghislaine approached her and complimented her intelligence and maturity, and invited Jane to travel with her, saying they were going to go meet powerful people who could help her. These visits with these powerful people, which we now know to be Epstein, quickly escalated from normal visits to full-blown sexual abuse at both his Palm Beach mansion and his New York townhouse. The second victim is Virginia Guffrey, who was recruited when she was 16 years old while working as a locker room attendant at Mar-a-Lago, Trump's resort in Palm Beach. Ghislaine approached her and asked her if she'd be interested in training as a professional masseuse, telling her she could make over $200 per massage. Virginia thought this was a legitimate job opportunity. She was from a working class family and needed the money. Shortly after, she was introduced to Epstein, and what started as massage training turned into years of sexual abuse and trafficking. The trap worked like this. First, Ghislaine would recruit them, get them to trust her. Then Ghislaine would participate in the sexual abuse herself, claiming this is just how things work at this level of wealth. She would downplay or normalize what was going on. The next step would be dependency. She would shower these girls in money and gifts, promises of future opportunities to keep the girls coming back. And then step 4 was isolation, if it was required, threats, legal intimidation, and shame to force these girls to stay silent. Ghislaine was the friendly face, the older woman who made everything seem safe and normal, which is exactly why the operation worked for so long. If it was Epstein doing something like this, I doubt it would have worked as well. What's really disturbing is that Ghislaine's modeling trap wasn't unique. Like, this was seen everywhere. It seems like it was part of a larger pattern happening across the country during the same time period. See, throughout the 90s, there were these aggressive casting agencies operating primarily in Florida and California. They'd call houses multiple times a day, approach girls at malls, and send flyers promising modeling opportunities and money, which was odd. I don't think there was really a shortage of want-to-be models, but it gets much weirder. These casting calls would only be in each city for a few days, and apparently when girls showed up, it was very bare bones, just a couch, a few chairs, a table. There was no professional photography equipment, no portfolio setup, nothing indicating a legitimate modeling agency. And afterward, the agency would vanish and move on to the next city. And when you look at the missing persons report from these cities during the time windows these agencies operated, there are multiple missing teen girls reported during those exact time periods. Women who went to these calls as teenagers have said the experiences were deeply unsettling. And after about 4 to 5 years of operating, these agencies just completely disappeared. I'm sure there's a couple still around, but I haven't been able to find any. Now, we can't definitively connect these to Epstein and Maxwell, but the playbook is damn near identical. Target vulnerable teenage girls, promise modeling opportunities, operate just legitimately enough to get parental approval, then disappear before questions get asked. And if you remember in my last Iceberg, in the Breeding Project entry, I mentioned the diary of the trafficked victim, document number EFTA 02731393. I don't know if I mentioned it in the last video, but I think this is truly the worst thing found in these files, no doubt. There's no evidence of Epstein eating babies other than the whole cream cheese fiasco thing, which we'll get into eventually. There's no evidence of satanic cults or anything like that, but we have a first-hand account of a girl who was imprisoned by Epstein and Ghislaine, someone who has undoubtedly been through this funnel of human trafficking that Ghislaine created for Epstein. I bring this journal up now because within it, the victim mentions Ghislaine twice in absolutely horrifying context. While the diary doesn't explicitly say how she was recruited, given everything we know about Ghislaine's operation, it's likely that this was one of the girls who was manipulated through the same modeling / scholarship trap. Except for her, it didn't stop at massages. Eventually, she became so entangled in this trafficking system that Epstein used her for his breeding project. Once again, this is the worst of the worst things I have been able to find in these files. I get sick every time I have to think about it or refer back to it for a video. The 2026 document release and other released information show just how systematic this was. There were logs scheduled and records of this whole operation. Ghislaine Maxwell wasn't just an accomplice, she was the architect of the entire recruitment infrastructure that allowed Epstein to sexually abuse probably hundreds of girls over decades. Moving on, we have the Wayfair conspiracy and the school photos theory. In 2020, a conspiracy theory went viral claiming that the furniture website Wayfair was being used to traffic children. People noticed that certain storage cabinets were priced absurdly high, like $13,000 for a basic cabinet high. And the product names were things like Yaritza or Samaya, which matched the names of recent missing young girls. People also noticed this real bizarre search quirk. If you typed SRS space USA plus certain number strings, including some Wayfair SKUs, into the search engine Yandex, it sometimes pulled up unrelated images of young children. Now, fact checkers found that this wasn't actually unique to Wayfair SKUs. Lots of random numbers could trigger similar results, which suggests that this was an algorithm rather than a Wayfair backdoor. But online sleuths treated it like a smoking gun of sorts because, yeah, they should have. Why are pictures of random children popping up when you type SKUs into a search engine? And like I said earlier, there were absurdly priced items, including some really expensive pillow listings. And people claim the listings disappeared after this theory went viral. Now, it's kind of hard to prove the timing or intent of this from the outside, but extreme pricing and listing changes do happen in large e-commerce platforms all the time. Sure, it's strange, but it's not something we've never seen before. Wayfair eventually came out and said the cabinets were industrial grade. The names were just standard product labels, and the whole thing was false. And to top that off, people have pointed out two really boring explanations that can possibly look sinister. Algorithms can spike prices when inventory inventory is low, and sellers sometimes use extreme prices as placeholders, kind of like a temporary do not buy tag, instead of just pulling the listing. To a human strolling through Wayfair at any time of the day, it looked like a secret price tag, but according to the Wayfair site, it's just business as usual. But the theory persisted, and here's the part that made it flare up again. A document circulating from the Epstein files shows a Wayfair charge of about $8,453 tied to Epstein's girlfriend. But all this really proves is that Epstein's girlfriend bought expensive stuff from normal companies, not that Wayfair was selling children. And the receipt doesn't even establish what the item was, but nonetheless, it's still quite weird, and it's something we should still consider going forward. And the reason people connected it to Epstein in the first place is because he actually did use shell companies, weird shipping logistics, and financial tricks to move people and money around. So while the Wayfair theory itself is probably not true, the underlying fear that trafficking networks use legitimate businesses as fronts is very true. Epstein has undoubtedly used at least one legitimate business as a front for his human trafficking ring. I'd go so far as to say more than just one, 100%. This dude has probably used countless legitimate businesses as fronts. Now, one more thing before I move on. One of the cabinet names in the Wayfair theory was Samaya, which matched a girl named Samaya M, who was reported missing at the time. People latched onto this as proof, but Samaya later resurfaced publicly on Facebook to confirm she was fine. And the fact that people are still posting this poor girl's face next to words like sex trafficking and sexual assault is insane, and I honestly feel bad for her. I'm not going to include a picture of her in this video. This is a real woman, and her life has undoubtedly been changed because of this conspiracy theory that may or may not even be real. Then there's the school portrait theory. Now this one, I think this one might have some truth to it. There's a related theory that school portrait companies like Lifetouch are used to create menus of children for traffickers. And here's where this gets real. Lifetouch is one of the biggest school photo companies in North America, serving over 25 million students every year. That's tens of thousands of schools. The ownership chain of Lifetouch is as follows. Lifetouch sits under Shutterfly, and Shutterfly is owned by the private equity firm Apollo Global Management. This is where Epstein's connection comes in. Leon Black, the former CEO and chairman of Apollo Global Management, shows up repeatedly in reportings tied to the Epstein document release. His name shows up loads within the files, and this man is currently being accused of a lot of things that can put him in jail for a very long time. What's documented and confirmed is this. Leon Black paid Jeffrey Epstein at least $158 million between 2012 and 2017, allegedly for tax and estate planning services. This came out in an independent review, and Black stepped down as CEO of Apollo in 2021 after that review became public, which is crazy timing. And Mark Rowan, the current CEO of Apollo, also has documented contact with Epstein. These people cannot stay away from Epstein. Recent reporting based on newly released emails shows scheduling and communication between Rowan and Epstein years after Epstein's 2008 conviction. Rowan knows the man Epstein was, but still decided to get involved with him. So yes, the company that owns Lifetouch, the company that photographs tens of millions of American school children every year, is owned by a private equity firm whose leadership has documented ties to Epstein. Lifetouch has publicly stated that it is not named in the Epstein documents, that it has never provided student images to third parties, and that Apollo and its investors don't have access to those images. Is there direct evidence that Lifetouch is being used to traffic children? No. But the real legitimate concern here is data handling. What's collected on picture day? How long is it retained? And how easily parents can opt out of request deletion? See, here's the thing. Most parents don't know Lifetouch collects and retains student information, whether or not you buy the photos. According to Lifetouch privacy statement, student images and data are typically retained for 12 to 18 months after picture day, unless a parent specifically requests deletion. Many parents don't even know this is happening and schools don't always make it clear that the photos are being kept in a database somewhere, even if you opt not to buy them. So even if there's no trafficking conspiracy theory, the fact remains, a company whose ownership has documented financial ties to Jeffrey Epstein, a sex trafficker who is known for trafficking young girls, has a database of millions of American children's photos. And most parents don't know about the retention policy or how to request deletion. And it really sucks because if the FBI did know about this, I doubt that they would do anything about it. But here's the thing. In viral trafficking panics like the Wayfair conspiracy, people tend to flood hotlines and investigators with low quality tips, making it incredibly hard to find actual credible reports. We can see a perfect example of this in the Epstein files when looking at the FBI hotline. We can't really tell what is real from the fake. That's exactly what probably happened with the Wayfair theory. But like I said, honestly, even if it was real, I don't think the FBI would have done anything about it. I mean, look how long Epstein was able to operate before being shut down. And like, was he really shut down? We don't know, right? When everyone's chasing these crazy furniture conspiracies, real cases can slip through the cracks. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing here. And also exactly what the DOJ wants. So the Wayfair theory is widely considered debunked. And the Yandex SRS Space USA trick doesn't appear to be a Wayfair specific thing. However, the Lifetouch ownership chain is real. Shutterfly bought Lifetouch and Apollo bought Shutterfly. Leon Black's $158 million in payments to Epstein are documented, and that relationship became a major reputational crisis for Apollo. And finally, we have the Barr family and the Lifeboat Foundation. This is where things get really weird. And I want to be clear, some of this is documented fact and some of this is connecting dots that may or may not mean anything. But the coincidences are there. In 1973, a man named Donald Barr published a science fiction novel called Space Relations. The plot of the book, and I'm not kidding, is about aristocratic elites who travel to a distant planet to engage in the slave trade of humans for sexual purposes. And Donald Barr wasn't just some random sci-fi author. He was the headmaster of the prestigious Dalton School in New York. 1 year after publishing this book about spacefaring child traffickers, in 1974, Donald Barr's school hired a 21-year-old college dropout with 0 teaching credentials to teach physics and math. That college dropout was Jeffrey Epstein. Now, it's believed Donald Barr, the man who wrote a book about elite child trafficking in space, hired Jeffrey Epstein, a future convicted sex trafficker, to work at an elite private school with access to a bunch of wealthy students. Now, that's not confirmed. It's believed Donald Barr hired Epstein. It does not take away the fact, though, that Epstein, without any qualifications, somehow got hired at the same school that Barr worked at. And it gets weirder. So, decades later, when Epstein was arrested in 2019, the U.S. Attorney General, the person overseeing the Department of Justice and the federal prison system where Epstein was being held, was William Barr. William Barr is Donald Barr's son. So, the son of the man who gave Epstein his first job was the same man in charge of the DOJ when Epstein died in federal custody. Now, Jeffrey Epstein was listed on the advisory board of an organization called the Lifeboat Foundation, which still exists today and has a website. You can go check it out if you really want to. The Lifeboat Foundation is a think tank focused on existential risk, basically preparing humanity for catastrophic events. On their website, they openly discuss programs like life shield bunkers, space habitats, and preserving humanity through underground cities and off-world colonies.
Organization dedicated to encouraging scientific advancements while helping humanity survive existential risks and possible misuse of increasingly powerful technologies, genetic engineering, nanotechnology, and robotics, AI, as we move towards the singularity.
Epstein was also connected to an organization called Teachers in Space, which I believe, I could be wrong when I say this, but I believe is part of the United States Space Foundation and discusses launching payloads into orbit. Now, whether this means anything or not is up for debate. But when you connect the dots, Donald Barr writing a book about trafficking children in space, then hiring Epstein, then Epstein later being involved with organizations discussing underground cities and off-world survival, and then William Barr overseeing Epstein's death, it paints a strange picture. Some conspiracy theorists believe Epstein wasn't just a lone predator, but part of a much larger intergenerational program involving human preservation and what some call a breakaway civilization. The idea is that the ultra wealthy are preparing to survive catastrophic events by building underground or off-world colonies, and they are incorporating their sex trafficking into it. Is this true? I don't know. But the fact that Donald Barr wrote a book about this exact concept in 1973, hired Epstein in 76, and Epstein later became involved with organizations discussing these exact topics, it's hard to ignore. And William Barr, Donald's son, was in charge when Epstein died? That's a weird coincidence. And that, my friends, is iceberg number 2 of the Epstein files. I still have a lot to talk about regarding this topic, so stay tuned and keep your head on a swivel. Don't believe everything you see on the internet. There's a lot of false information on the internet right now regarding the Epstein files.